All right, we can get started. So welcome everyone to week 4 of the Leadership Alliance Professional Development Workshop Series. My name is Dr. Jane Indorf, and I'm the manager of graduate and undergraduate programs with the Leadership Alliance. I'll be moderating today's session. This event is a component of the Leadership Alliance Virtual Professional Development Series. The Leadership Alliance Executive Office and its partners created this initiative to ensure continuity of skill building, networking, and exposure to graduate programs for undergraduate and graduate students from across the country and the world. Paired with our Wednesday afternoon workshop series, we hope to expose you to a discussion of critical issues, allow you to network with each other and our wonderful doctoral scholars, as well as develop learning approaches and skills for navigating your research careers. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing and speaking with doctoral scholar, Dr. Marcus Jones. Dr. Marcus B. Jones is an executive director at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, Incorporated in Tarrytown, New York. Marcus received his BS degree in microbiology from Southern University and A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Upon completion of his undergraduate degree, Dr. Jones was awarded a prestigious fellowship from the David and Lucille Packard Foundation that would fully support his doctoral studies at New York University. During his time at NYU, Dr. Jones was awarded a UNCF Merck Graduate Dissertation Fellowship to further support his doctoral training. Dr. Jones completed his doctoral training in 2005 and earned his Ph.D. in microbiology. He continued his scientific training as a postdoctoral fellow at the J. Craig Ventnor Institute from 2005 to 2006. In 2006, Dr. Jones was promoted to a staff scientist at JCVI and subsequently promoted to an assistant professor in the departments of genomic medicine and infectious diseases. In 2014, Dr. Jones was recruited to be a member of the startup team for Human Longevity, Inc., to lead microbiome sequencing. In 2016, Dr. Jones was recruited to join Research Program Management at Regeneron to help establish and manage genetics collaborations for the Regeneron Genetics Center. Dr. Jones now heads the RGC Research Program Management team, where he manages a team of scientists that provide program management support for all collaborations, therapeutic discovery projects, strategic initiatives, and research operations. So welcome, Dr. Jones. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Jane, for having me, and looking forward to sharing whatever knowledge I may have with the students.
Great. So I thought we could get started with you telling us a little bit about your pathway, like how you got interested in microbiology, how you decided to go to grad school.
Sure. As a kid, I was always fascinated with viruses and bacteria, and that kind of stuck with me all the way through high school and through college. And when you look studying human genetics or bacterial genetics, really understanding how bacteria so quickly evolve. So being able to see something in a petri dish one day or streak it on a plate, to seeing it grow or develop resistance to an antibiotic, or just to see that natural evolution in a very short window, to me was very fascinating. And the fact that bacteria encompass our entire body, inside and exterior, it really made me begin to think more about when we think of a human being, what do we really mean? There's the bacteria, there's our own human cells, and there are all these other microscopic organisms. And it was a world that you couldn't see unless you really zoomed in on it. And so that microscopic or the microbiology really was a calling to me. And so I decided after graduating undergrad to go into NYU for my Ph.D. in microbiology, where I was able to study how bacteria talk to one another, whether they had a language to speak to the same type of bacteria or a different language where they could talk across different species or different types of bacteria. And you begin to learn so much, not only about how those organisms communicate, but it can be translated into how we think as a society and how we look at other cultures. So for me, it was just fascinating.
Awesome. And so how did you choose your graduate program, or how did you decide to apply to NYU?
A great question. So it all started from my summer as a land scholar at NYU in 1999. In the Palisades of 1999, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, because I got to be with like-minded students, and really see the research others were doing. But the mentor I had, Dr. Joel Oppenheim, he was just so warm, so inviting, and such a great mentor. It let me know right then and there, New York was the only place for me to be. I applied to Michigan and other places and got in, but that environment, that nurturing environment, that cared about me not only as a student but as a person, let me know right then and there that's where I needed to be for my doctoral studies.
Great. Yes. Choosing the right mentor is really, really important when you're deciding what grad school to go to.
Yeah. And a mentor that's really invested in you as a person and your success, not only in that limited time when you're at NYU or wherever that host institution is, but someone who's vested in you succeeding as an individual throughout your career.
Definitely. So how was your transition from completing your bachelor's degree and then going straight into a PhD program? And what advice would you give to somebody who is doing that, going straight from undergrad to grad school?
For me, it was a natural progression. I was always used to working all the time. So when I was in undergrad, I had a part-time job. I was in the marching band. I was in part of the SGA, the student government, and then I was carrying a full load in college. So for me, I always liked to be busy and doing something. And so going straight into graduate school without taking too much time off allowed me to just keep that academic drive going, to getting into the lab and really thinking about where I wanted to do with my PhD, or what are those different areas of research I wanted to go into. You do have to really focus, because there are a lot of distractions, and you've grown and mature in one environment in undergrad where you're used to the college experience. But one of the things that's you learn very quickly is when you're going on to graduate school, it's also be getting your first full-time job, because not only are you going to school, you're working in a lab. Sometimes you're teaching courses, and then you have to support your own self. You're paying your rent, you're paying all these other things that are just the day-to-day living expenses. So, you begin to learn to budget not only your time, but your money, and really understand what it means as you transition to the professional field.
Great. Yeah, thanks. I did the same thing. I went straight from undergrad to grad school, and it definitely, all those things, came onto my shoulders, and it is an adjustment, but definitely doable. Okay, we have several questions that were submitted about working in industry and for a pharmaceutical company. So what do you think is the greatest difference between working in academia and working for industry or a pharmaceutical company?
That's a great question. So, when you think of academia, it's driven mostly by grants. You have to submit a grant, you have to wait in that review period and hope you get into that small percentage that have grants that are funded. Typically in industry, and not talking about where I am right now in Regeneron, but in biotech and biopharma, it's typically the research is based on what are the business needs, or where the market trends are going, or what are the critical therapies that are needed right then and there. Where I'm at Regeneron now is giving me the opportunity to not have to worry too much about where the market is going, because it's still run by the original 30 scientists that started the company 35 years ago. So it's in Regeneron, we follow the science. Wherever our science takes us, it allows us to continue down there. And by focusing on the science, it gives us an opportunity to develop our technology and our platforms that we can apply to many different areas. So one of the major differences when you're thinking about industry versus academia, research and academia, a large of it, part of it is funding. Your academia, you're solely dependent, or mostly dependent on grant funding. And in R01, I think it's about $250,000 a year, $2.5 million over 5 years. You can do some great work there. But when you're thinking about industry, there's a much greater resources where you can help accelerate some of the science. So, neither one is necessarily better than the other. It's about what you want to do as a researcher or scientist. Do you want to work in a much larger environment, like in biotech, on developing therapeutics, or would you prefer to work on understanding and driving the science and understanding the building blocks of life? You know, how we understand the basics of genetics, which are very important things, because understanding those basic scientific fundamentals helps inform what we do in developing new therapeutics.
Yeah, coming from academia myself, grant funding and getting grants is just becoming more and more competitive. So in industry, basically, you don't need to worry about the financial aspect, would you say?
No, you still have to worry about it. Even though we don't have to submit grants, we have to be very conscientious of our budget. So, many of the pharmaceutical companies delegate or dedicate a significant portion of their revenue towards research and development to keep ensuring that the pipeline is growing and being innovative. But we have to, when we do want to do large experiments, we do have to put in what those costs are. And we do have to go to our CFO or our financial groups to get approval to allow those projects forward. So we have a little bit bigger of a pot of money where we can do more experiments, but we still have to be very conscientious of how we're spending money.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So in your current position, what do you do? And overall and on a daily basis, what does your day look like?
For me, I'm like a kid in a candy store here at Regeneron. So, my team, works end to end across research and moving things across discovery pipeline and program manager. And what does that mean? The first part of my team works in helping to set up new collaborations around the world. We're talking to individuals, scientists, governments about setting up sequencing projects or different molecular assays where we can begin understanding these biomarkers, whether genetic, proteomic, metabolomic, some molecular assay, and how it correlates with human health outcomes. And once that group, it's kind of like a research business operations group. So we spend a lot of time in developing the scientific plan and thinking about what we want to do with that type of asset. The other part of my team, the middle bucket, the research operations, once we've kicked off a collaboration, works to bring in samples, bring in phenotype data, coordinates the analysis of all of those samples and data, and then collaborates with our external collaborators on analyzing the data. So it's a kind of an operations where we're doing there's a lot of moving parts, and we're tracking a lot of different projects and assets. And then the third bucket of target discovery, we're working with our scientists to look at the data to make those new discoveries, whether it's a protective loss of function in GPR75 that's protective from obesity or cardiovascular disease, or HSD17B13 that's protective from developing NASH or liver disease. We actually get to look in the science and be in those discussions with our senior management to say, this is something we should think about as a new target to drive target discovery. On a day-to-day basis, no 2 days are the same. I'm in a lot of meetings, but they're different type of meetings where 1 minute I'm talking about autoimmune diseases, the next meeting could be about cardiovascular metabolic disorders or age-related illnesses or neural impairment. So I get exposed to so many different sciences. I'm always in a learning environment.
That sounds really fun to me because you're always learning so much about so many different things, and yeah, keeps it interesting. So how many people are on your team?
There's 8 people on our team. So we're a lean team that supports 185 people across the RGC. But it's not just those 185 of the RGC. We also are the relationship managers for all of our external collaborators. We have over 130 collaborations around the world. And then the internal scientists. So our jobs are to link our external collaborators with our internal scientists, and then the internal Regeneron scientists with the RGC genetics teams. So we're having conversations both internally and externally. So there's many, many different lines of communication going on.
Yeah, I never really thought about that industry would have so many external collaborators.
Yeah.
What are some examples of your collaborators? Like, is it with academics, or are you only collaborating with private industry?
Oh, no, we have collaborations. So one of our largest collaborations we had over the past years is with the UK Biobank. The UK Biobank was set up by the UK government to recruit 500,000, 500,000 people, where they got extensive health records and clinical data. And the RGC, the Regeneron Genetics Center, collaborated with several other biotech companies where we exome sequenced and genotyped all 500,000 people. This now has become a resource for the entire world. So anyone can apply to get access to the data, both the phenotype and the genetics data. We've also collaborated with very small laboratories. So we've had studies as small as 40 samples looking at rare diseases to other studies that are looking at tens of thousands of diseases with different academic investigators. We've also worked with other nonprofit companies, as well as other biotech companies, many different projects. So we collaborate all around the world, and there's not a one size fits all model.
Wow, that's so interesting. Things you don't think about. So as the head of your research team, what qualities do you think are essential for a leader to create an immersive and properly functioning environment?
Great question. So, a lot of it is built on soft skills. And one of the most important ones is communication, both written and oral communication. So, what I've found over the years is where you have the most conflict is because there's bad communication. So someone that can communicate clearly and tailor that communication to different audiences, whether that's speaking to your senior manager, to the scientists, or to your individual team members, and really listening and understanding. You can't come to an opinion too quickly. You always have to take the time to think, process, and hear what the other individual is saying, whether that's your own direct reports, members of your broader team, or other scientists or senior management. And then you tailor that communication appropriately.
So would you say that's one of the important skills that you look for when you're hiring for your team is somebody who's well-versed in communication? And what other qualities are important for somebody on your team?
Yeah, definitely communication is one of those top priorities. Another is collaboration. There's not much that gets done anywhere, not just for Regeneron, but in the scientific arena, not without collaboration. No one can do everything by themselves. Many companies and research labs assume that, oh, I can make the discovery, I can move things all by myself. But we're in a world now where, there's many different expertise across different fields, and we are dependent on others' knowledge base in order to move the field forward. So collaboration is another key element.
Would you say that it's important for somebody on a research team to have all of the kind of basic science knowledge that's needed, or are there like training programs that people can join when they join Regeneron or industry?
No, great question. So, you do need a base scientific understanding. It's the scientific method, good analytical reasoning. But what I find it's easier to teach someone the science. It's harder to teach someone the soft skills. So having a strong soft skills foundation, a lot of those skills can translate to many different areas. And at Regeneron specifically, we like to refer to ourselves as Regeneron University. We have seminars all the time, learning and trainings on general immunology, how a T cell works, how does the adaptive immune system works, and understanding how we make antibodies or gene therapies, or how you can do CRISPR for gene editing. So you can teach those technical skills, but it's the relational skills and other soft skills that are key skills for success, not just in industry, in academia as well.
Right. Do you think that grad school equips people well to join an industry position in terms of the soft skills, or do most people usually do a postdoc before going into industry?
Yeah, I think it depends on the field. So, what one of the key things I learned as a graduate student and as a postdoc was project management. You know, and if you look at it, running a lab is about project management. You have to understand who's doing what experiments need to happen in what order in order to get the most appropriate answer, ensuring that you have the right positive and negative controls. Is your experimental design correct? And so you're always thinking about the project and managing the project. And so you get that base technical skill there. Where in academia and where we begin to learn more on those soft skills is on the communication and collaboration, because what I'm seeing now is that you're having many different labs collaborate to move projects forward. Whether if there's a group that's developed a specific assay or a biomarker for understanding a specific disease, one group may be experts in type 2 diabetes, but they don't have the right animal model to look at that knockout. And so they work together and publish together to drive the science forward. So we're seeing it more and more that in graduate school and as a postdoc, you're beginning to get more networking, more collaboration, and more training and communication. Because as a scientist, regardless in academia or in industry, written communication and oral are critical for success. For academia, your written communication and how you write your science to the NIH or to NSF to get a grant, and how you speak invited to meetings, how you communicate your science to a broader forum. And it's the same here at Regeneron or in industry, where we have to communicate our science to senior management or write up annual reports to our leadership.
And so I bet oftentimes you're kind of translating the science to anybody so that anyone can understand it. Someone who doesn't have that, really high level technical understanding of something. Yeah.
And one of our missions in biotech and as well as in academia is to ensure the communities that we're doing science research on understand the science. So you have to take that level of understanding and communication to a scientifically naive audience and make sure they understand the science that we're doing as well.
Yeah, and as an undergrad, I mean, that was not something that skills that I ever thought about needing. But as I went through graduate school, it became apparent to me that you really need to have strong soft skills to make it in any field. Okay, so as the leader of your team, how do you ensure the diversity and inclusivity in the next generation of scientists? So what steps do you take or have you taken to increase diversity in your own group and to make sure that those voices are heard?
I don't know. And inclusion is a very key thing. Often, and especially in senior level meetings, there's an arbitrary kind of cutoff sometimes on if you're not this title or in this or some other group, you're not necessarily included in meetings. One of the things we do purposefully, with intention, is to make sure any of our meetings, even with senior management, that anyone has the ability to have access to those meetings. And that's important. So even if you're not speaking up in the meeting, being exposed and understanding what types of conversations are being had in those meetings are critical for helping the more junior team members to develop and to begin thinking about what senior management may want. So it's making sure they have access and ability to be a part of those meetings. Something else I do is to make sure my team have whatever trainings they need for their own professional development. If they want to go to a training halfway across the country on learning Salesforce or some other tool, I'll send them, giving them the opportunity to go to scientific meetings as an attendee to understand and grow their own scientific network and scientific knowledge base. We purposefully go and attend meetings like AberCams or Leadership Alliance and do a lot of recruiting for open headcount at venues like that, because we want to make sure we're as inclusive as possible, both in the hiring and the mentoring. And also another thing on my team is I really encourage all of my team to get another mentor outside of our team. So even within Regeneron, for them to buddy up with another scientist so that they get other perspectives on how to grow their career.
Yeah, that the mentoring aspect is something that we talk a lot about in our virtual professional development series. And, having more than one mentor is so key, and, having different mentors for different aspects of your career. So let's see. What motivated you to move from academia to the pharmaceutical industry? And how is working industry aligned with your career goals and your own aspirations?
I don't know. Making the change. So, I took kind of a half step. So I was in academia at the JCVI for almost 10 years, and then was given an opportunity. And these things, you always have to, when an opportunity comes, sometimes you take them, or, sometimes you turn them down. And I decided to take a risk and be a part of a startup company. And it gave me the opportunity to experience something that was very different than academia. And it was being not brave, but willing to make that bet on myself that I could try something new. There was nothing wrong with academia. I had actually just gotten 2 grants funded, so I was funded for at least the next 3 to 5 years. But I wanted to try something a little bit different, where instead of doing basic science research, I wanted to venture more into applied research and really understanding how we could take the information we were finding and translate it to a therapy or how to help people. And then that was when I went to HLI. And then making the move from HLI, human longevity, to Regeneron, I was, even more intrigued on how do we take a genetic finding and translate that to a therapeutic and help hundreds of millions of people around the world. So it was just a natural progression for me, to start in academia, but then move to how in biotech pharma, to help with therapeutic development.
Was that a really hard decision for you to make?
It wasn't hard for me. But the things that were the hardest parts were the family side of things, because I was uprooting my family or jumping around the country, and all of my family's from Louisiana, and then I'm moving from Maryland to California and then to New York. So that was the personal side of things were the most challenging. But for me, my own personal academic and professional desires, it wasn't.
Okay, so I'm going to move to some of the questions that have been submitted so far during our session. So let's say that you're trying to plan during a long-term full-time research project, and you have 1 to 2 meetings with a professor. How do you know that you've chosen the right mentor? Or in other words, like, what qualities are important for you to look for in a mentor? And like, what are some of the right questions you can ask to get to that?
Man, no, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
You want to find someone that really is truly invested in you. Not someone who's just an email, LinkedIn, but someone who really wants to sit down and makes the time to talk to you, but really listen to you. I always look for mentors that kind of put the onus on me to do most of the speaking, and they're listening to me. They should be in listening mode and shouldn't, my opinion, but not in a reactionary, like telling you did something wrong, but giving you advice on other alternative pathways or other solutions on how to accomplish a challenge that you're going through. So, I always look for a mentor that's willing to listen, but also a mentor that's willing to, in a sense, keep it real. That's not going to sugarcoat things, and I will just kind of tell you, no, you're wrong, or and help guide you through it. Not just in telling you that you're wrong, but here is an alternative solution. So for me, what worked best is having someone that was being very transparent, who would listen to me, and who actually reached out to me to keep following up. And the advice I'd always give is that if someone is willing to block off an hour or 2 hours of their time, they're probably serious in being a mentor for you, because they're taking the time to be there for you.
Right. So do you think there's like a magic number of mentors one should have in grad school?
More than one. No, I mean, I've probably had dozens, if not hundreds, of mentors over my life. And I still get more, because there's just so many different roads you can travel. You never know where you want to be or going to be in the next 5 or 10 years. You may find something that stirs a different passion. I may want to switch to semiconductors and working in the AI space. So, well, I need to find a mentor who's an expert in that area and that can really guide me along that career plan. And I also think of mentors as you can think of them as your peers as well, because your cohort or your fellows that are going through these summer programs together, you don't know where everyone's going to end up, and that person can become a mentor to you to help guide you to where they are now. So you never can find a mentor that's too old or too young.
Yeah, I found that as well, that some of my grad school other students actually did become like mentors later on as I went into a postdoc. Okay, here's another question that was submitted. So if you go straight from bachelor's to PhD, how do you figure out, what to write about? And I think this is maybe about in terms of the personal statement. Does it matter, like in the long term, what you put in your personal statement? Is it okay to, if you write about one interest, is it okay to change your interests later on as you're going through grad school?
Absolutely. As you're going through grad school or even applying, you're getting a survey of what are some of the research opportunities at the host institution. When I got into NYU, I started in a lab that worked on Staph aureus, and I rotated in a trypanosome lab working on parasites, and then I finally ended up in a lab that worked on Helicobacter pylori and other intracellular pathogens. So you don't know where you're going to be at the end. There's so many things that can change from faculty coming and going. So you may end up in a thesis lab that's a brand new faculty member, but they could be someone who's really energetic, wanting to be a mentor and looking for students to come on. Or you may have a more senior scientist come to a lab or leave that you were initially going there for. And I've seen that where, there were individuals that were in grad school together, and their lab left NYU and went to Yale, I believe. And so that student had to make the choice of, do I stay or do I go? And they had to find a new lab. So I wouldn't worry too much about defining what that research project post your qualifying exam is going to be. You have plenty of time to figure that out. I say look for the programs that offer you the best mentoring and the best environment for you as an individual.
Right. And then I guess it also doesn't matter in terms of, building those soft skills too. Like there are skills that are so widely applicable that aren't specific to certain research projects.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it still frowned upon for future health professionals to work in pharmaceutical companies? I guess, could you make the move from being a health professional to working in a pharmaceutical company and vice versa?
So I can tell you at Regeneron, there's a significant number of MD, PhDs, and other professionals at Regeneron. There are a lot of PhDs, but the company is run by 2 MD, PhDs. So the physicians play a critical role, because if you think about it, we're trying to understand that the application of science and research into human health and therapeutic development, understanding the immune system, how the pharmacodynamics and interactions of a therapeutic with an individual. So there's a lot of human biology there and medical knowledge that's needed. So there's lots of healthcare professionals that are a part of Regeneron and many other pharmaceutical companies. There are entire groups that are called medical affairs and early clinical scientists, clinicians that are helping to develop this clinical trial study designs, or even the preclinical study design. So there's a host of healthcare professionals in drug companies.
Great, thank you. And this question just came in. Are there specific lab skills or experiences that people who are hiring in industry are looking for? And I guess in terms of the experiences, that would be an interesting thing to hear about.
Yeah, it depends on the different company. What I can say is big data is what's coming in the future. Understanding, what are those tools, those AI or machine learning tools to look at the big data. Generating the data, whether sequencing or high throughput proteomics, those are mostly automated. And actually the groups, the wet lab groups are small, where we're seeing a large number of headcount or people hired for are how to analyze the big data. So those big data scientists, whether analytical or statistical geneticists, individuals with computational science backgrounds, because that's the trick is mining the data to finding those new therapeutic targets.
And what are some of the specific challenges and opportunities that you've encountered while managing scientific collaborations? And what are some of the collaborations you've really enjoyed working on? I know you mentioned the biobank, but
Some of the challenges, recruitment. We have lots of prospective studies, and that means, we're projecting, we think we're going to get X number of people over a certain amount of time. But one of the challenges, and starting from 2020 is when the pandemic hit. You weren't getting a lot of recruitment for different studies. And we really struggled on getting samples and individuals to consent and be a part of these studies. So that's always a challenge in, kind of guessing as best as possible, projecting what are the study outcomes going to look like. I would say my most the favorite or my favorite collaboration so far is one we've started recently with Meharry Medical College and a few other pharma partners, AstraZeneca, Novo Nordisk, and Roche Genentech, called Together for Change. And so with collaboration with Meharry Medical College, we created the Diaspora for Human Genomics Institute. And the goal here, is 5 pillars. The first is to really empower communities on health and medical research sites. And what that means is to really drive ongoing education efforts, making informed decisions about the population, about their health and research. We're also working with the diaspora in Meharry Medical College on deepening the community STEM education. We've established a early exposure to K through 12 STEM DNA Learning Center in Nashville. And then beyond that, bringing students, both graduate students, undergraduates, postdocs, to our respective biotech sites to get them exposed to biotech, biopharma, but as well as just STEM research. We're looking to expand the genetic counseling workforce. There's not too many genetic counselors around the country, and even less than for African Americans. So we're making a huge impact there. But one of the key things is that the consortia, this project, is we're creating a genetics research asset of 500,000 African Americans or of African descent sequenced, and making that as a resource to the Diaspora for Human Genomics. And so they can generate publications, get grant funding, and using it to collaborate around the world. So this will be probably the largest African ancestry studies in the world.
that's so cool. Sounds like you're always being involved in new collaborations and projects.
It's how to drive the science.
Mm-hmm. So for someone who's interested in genomics, what advice would you give them, like in terms of what things they should learn about or what they should do in graduate school to prepare themselves for a career in genomics?
Yeah, no, understanding the basics of genetics, Mendelian genetics, and founder effects, drifted variants, standard genetics, but beginning more acquainted with big data. The sequencing. When I was going through grad school, it was the first human genome. It cost, I believe, $1 billion and took 10 years to do. Now we can sequence 1 million samples a year. So we can generate millions of samples of data, but it's mining that data. So, it's becoming better equipped to look at big data, whether that's using programming or whatever tools there may be to make those genetic associations.
Yeah, so my background's also in genetics, and when I was in grad school, big data was not a thing, and AI too. But I would imagine that those are two big areas that are going to just grow in importance for genomics.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. So have you ever experienced imposter syndrome, and what tips do you have for our students to overcome that imposter syndrome?
No, I would definitely say as I transitioned from undergrad to grad school or graduate school, coming from a HBCU in early 2000, or 2000 actually, and you know, I go to NYU, this private institution. The other students are from Harvard, from Yale, Princeton, all these Ivy League schools, and I'm like, what am I doing here? There's no way I can compete with these guys. Um, and I dealt with that for a long time, but I slowly over time began to think about it in the basic principles of chemistry. A Boat and chair conformation in organic chemistry is the same at Harvard as it is at Southern. The theories of fluid dynamics and all these other theories are the exact same. So they have the same information. It's just, they had more resources and access to the wet lab, but the foundations were the same. So, I may have to work a little bit harder to gain the skills in the wet lab, but, I applied myself and then very quickly I begin building that confidence. There's still times when you kind of reflect back and say, am I in the right room or am I here only because of X, Y, or Z? But you have to keep that confidence that you earned your spot here. One of my mentors always said success is 10% luck, but 90% preparation. So you have to really be prepared and prepare yourself for an opportunity.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And I think, that transition time between undergrad to grad school is certainly the time I also felt imposter syndrome. It's like your whole life is just
Yeah.
changed. So we had some questions about your fellowships and funding for grad school. You got funding for your entire time in grad school, and how did you find those opportunities, and how'd you get them?
Yeah, so the David Lucille Packard Foundation, it was a mentor of mine, nominated. So again, mentor. You never know how a mentor can help you, and that's why I say start as early as possible because they hear about things, whether they're fellowships or travel opportunities that you would have never heard about, and they can nominate you and at least make you aware of those things. So, a mentor of mine that came across the application and she just told me, sit down, write this, and submit it. And I did. And lo and behold, I was awarded a David and Lucille Packard Foundation Fellowship. And the value, and I can't speak to this enough, is it created an immediate network for me of all these past and present fellows, and the funding. So when you walk into a graduate lab where your stipend is fully paid for and you have travel funding, you're free to them. That means they don't have, all they have to do is pay for the experimental reagents. They don't have to pay salary. They don't have to pay overhead. They don't have to pay anything else. You're literally a pair of hands that they can use for the next 5 years to drive their science forward. And for me, it was great because then I could really pick any lab I wanted. So it was a win-win situation. And then later on, I received a UNCF Merck's dissertation fellowship that I couldn't accept the funding stipend because at the time there was a cap to what graduate students could receive, but it gave me, again, immediate access to more mentors, more peers, a greater scientific network, and travel funding to go to any meeting I wanted to in the world to talk about my science and to get exposed to the science others were doing. So, there's so many benefits, not only the financial, but really the networking and mentoring that the fellowships offer.
So did you think about applying to fellowships as an undergrad, or did that kind of come in your early grad school years?
Well, the Packard was in undergrad,
Okay.
but that was only I didn't think about it. My mentor thought of me.
Right.
I did it because my mentor told me to do it.
Wow. It's amazing how mentors can shape our pathways.
Yep.
So, being fully funded in graduate school, did you have any TA-ships or RA-ships? Did you have other responsibilities besides just doing your research?
No, that was one of the benefits when you're fully funded, but I had the option and I took it to TA medical microbiology and parasitology. So, and I actually TA'd the molecular genetics course for some of the medical students. So it was an opportunity for me to learn, work on my communication skills because I had to teach medical microbiology, parasitology, and genetics to those that didn't know it as well. And so I had to know it that much better and be able to communicate it to those students.
So really, that's kind of when you started your training for working in industry,
Yep.
communication.
Yep.
What are some of the things that I know we talked about a mentor and what to look for in a mentor, but in terms of graduate school programs, I guess what were you looking for, and what are some of the what advice would you give in terms of deciding where to apply?
I would say, there's a couple of things. One, when you're picking a graduate program, that you have to think about geography, location, and do you need to be closer to family, or are you okay being kind of isolated, being an N of one in an environment? Those are very important things because you have to think about your own mental health, psychological safety. Do you have that network of family, or do you have an extended network in another location that can serve as a kind of a surrogate family? The other thing is I always look for existing mentors. So NYU was very comfortable for me because I had Joel there. I had all the faculty that I had met during the summer who were great mentors. I did have a network in Michigan, and I turned them down, and they got a little mad at me. But you have to make the best choice for you. But then during the interview process, I really paid attention to how when I asked questions, how responsive the faculty were, and how they would ask me questions to see if they were trying to get to know me as just as an applicant or as a person. And that to me was showing me how invested they were in my success as a student in their program.
Mm-hmm. And I know you said that you were involved in student government things. And so for graduate programs, is that kind of extracurricular stuff like important? Like and are there resources in terms of support outside of your program that are important?
It wasn't important necessarily for applying to graduate school. And when I got in grad school, I actually was the co-president of the student, the graduate school student body as well. For me, it was important. It was a personal thing because I got to know many of the other students, both that were more senior, and then constantly on a reoccurring basis, the incoming classes. And again, it was a networking opportunity. It forced me out of my little bubble of my lab, and I got to meet all of the new students and in exchange scientifically. But I also got to stay very much engaged with the CERT program at NYU. So being a part of LANS every year, going to Abercans every year with the CERT program. I think those things were important for me because it also gave me the opportunity to mentor those summer students every year and give back, just like so many others had given for me.
So we got a couple of questions about business and the business side of industry. How do you see your background in science intersecting with your work in business? I guess, are there transferable skills that you have that are applicable to the business side of things you do?
I would say, at least at Regeneron, I'm always a scientist first. I think at every collaboration, what's the scientific value and merit, and how does it support our mission to developing new drugs at Regeneron? So I'm always putting my scientist hat on first and looking at evaluating everything, whether it's our existing programs, potential collaborations, or how we do the operations the science drives pretty much all of my decisions. I even look at how I manage my team in a scientific manner, because I really want to understand, why certain things, if there's or members of the team that are not happy, or there's issues, I try to digest it and think very analytically. Okay, what are the root causes of these things, and help identify those problems, and so I can better serve the team, be like putting on my scientist hat.
Right. So you really are managing people,
Yeah.
and not only like the projects, but I guess the people are, what make the projects run. So that makes sense. Okay, so we're getting close to the top of the hour. And I was wondering if you could give some advice in terms of when you're finishing graduate school. What advice do you give when someone's looking at their next step? Like, how do you go about finding a job? How do you know if a postdoc is right for you? Or what did you experience?
So, again, it's for me, it all started with collaboration. I got my postdoc. I was collaborating at the JCVI with another investigator when looking at the gene expression of Bacillus anthracis, the causative agent for anthrax. And it was, we collaborated in this project where we were studying microarrays and understanding those different pathways. And I would go down to Maryland from New York, and it was because of that collaboration and how I was communicating the science while I was there and coming back and forth, that it actually serendipitously led to me getting a postdoc. Because on one of my visits, Scott Peterson at the time, he said, "Hey, you've been coming here all this time. It'd be great if you want to stay and do your postdoc." So I wasn't even looking, and he just offered me a position. So, I think the more students collaborate when they're in grad school, those opportunities naturally open up, because not only do people get to know you as a person, they get to know you as a collaborator, as a scientist, and as they're expanding their teams or opportunities come open, they think of you because they know you as an individual and not as an application.
Yeah, I myself also have learned, like, I can't stress enough how important building that network is. It really is what opens doors. And I know I spent a lot of time on Indeed and different, job sites, but really when it all came down to it, it was about who I knew.
Yep.
All right. So is there any other advice that you have for our students before we wrap up our session today? Anything that we didn't cover?
I would just say always be willing to make an investment in yourself, whether that's taking more classes, traveling to a meeting, taking opportunities to speak. Even if you're not very comfortable, the more you practice, the more you get exposed to it, the less you have anxiety and these feelings, and the better you get at communicating. And treat it as having a conversation. When you're in grad school, you may not believe it, but you are the expert on your area, and you know more than anyone else in the world. So you should feel confident and speak as you are that expert, and know it and own it.
That's great advice. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jones, for joining us today. Really expanded my understanding of industry. Something that I've in the past thought about switching over to, but I'm still in academia, which I love. And thank you so much for your time and advice. And if you'd like me to share any of your contact information, I can do that. I'll follow up with you. And I also want to thank our students for tuning in today and for submitting such great questions. So we will be back on Wednesday with a panel on deciding your path after undergrad. And I hope that everyone will join us for that as well. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.